and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. One thing that my dad told us when we were growing up is he said there are 2 months that are really good for getting alfalfa established in our area, and both of those months start with the letter A. He said A is for alfalfa. That's April and that's August. So it's August now, and if we're trying to get alfalfa established in the summer, this is a great time to get it done. We'll talk about some of the things that you'll need to keep in mind to get alfalfa started.
Well, another thing you need to do when you're out scouting your soybean fields is take a look for lodging. One of the biggest causes is really what's wrong with the stem. So we want to talk about that today and how you decrease any soybean lodging issues in the future.
Well, we always have to get weeds under control. We'll talk about controlling this week's weed later in the show, but first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about digging a hole on the farm.
Well, okay, so you think about it. If I want to dig a hole in a cornfield, well, the spot right behind us is perfect. We're right on the end. We don't have to destroy any crop. You could just go ahead and dig at any point during the year. That would be nice, but it's not going to be very good because we're right on the edge of the field. There's compaction. I mean, it's where all the tractors and everybody's driving into the field. What you want to do is be out in the field just a little bit so you can actually see what it's like in the rest of the field.
All right, so here's what we're trying to accomplish. We want to dig what we call root pits so we can see the root system of the corn plant or any plant that we're trying to raise. And some of the things that we're looking for, number one would be, where are our compaction layers at? 2 is, how good is that overall root system? Do we have other issues out there? It could be everything from root feeding from an insect to, we've had disease issues. There are a whole bunch of things, and it's just eye-opening to farmers when they dig root pits and they can actually see, okay, not just above ground, but now they can see what's going on below ground too.
Okay, 2 key things here. If you're not a farmer and you're probably already wondering what some of this terminology is, first of all, compaction. When you drive out in a field or when you walk out in a field, the pressure from whatever's going across the ground, whether it's your body and your feet or whether it's a tractor tire, they're going to push down on that soil. And if they push down too much, they can compact the soil, make a hard layer. So when farmers are doing tillage, for example, let's just say they're doing tillage at 8 inches deep. If they continue to do tillage at 8 inches deep year after year after year, well, 8 inches down, there tends to be a hard compacted layer. And that's what we're talking about here, because if you've got that barrier where your roots can't get through that, that's going to limit how much water and how many nutrients they can access in the soil. Obviously, for farmers trying to raise big crops, we don't want any limits to the amount of water and nutrients that our roots can get to. The other thing here is, why do we even care about looking below the ground? Well, half of the plant is below the ground. So I realize 99.9% of the population drives by a field. All they care about is, well, how do things look above ground? Everything looks fine. Well, we're good. But if there's something that looks a little bit off, most people think, well, there must be some bug or some bad weather or something that is short with that crop. What they're forgetting to think about is it all starts with the root system. And if we're going to see something above ground, chances are we've got a problem with the root system. Either it's limited and can't explore enough soil, or like Brian said, there's a disease or a bug or something impacting it. So for farmers or anyone with a garden, a lawn, whatever, it's just critical to know what's happening below the ground. So you've got a great opportunity. All you have to do is dig. It doesn't cost anything to do it, although you may have to rip up a few plants, and I know that made our dad really nervous the first time we did it.
Well, yeah, but every corn plant's only worth a penny or two. So let's say you rip up a couple hundred of them. Ooh, you got $2 to $4, okay? It's no big deal. And let me just tell you, going back to the very first root pit that we ever dug and how eye-opening it was for us. Okay, it was a year where it was pretty dry and you could see the corn above ground was suffering. So we dug a root pit about 4 feet deep, and you could see most of the roots were in that top 6 inches or so. And we came out the next morning after we dug the root pit, so it had been sitting there overnight, and there's water standing in the bottom of the pit. There's all kinds of water down below ground, and all our roots were right in the top 6 inches. Okay, so it didn't take me very long to figure out, we got a problem here. We've got to get our roots deeper. There's plenty of moisture down below. Our crop shouldn't be suffering. So that's when we started really addressing that compaction issue Darren already talked about.
So if you're a farmer, we encourage you, get out right now, dig a root pit in a couple of spots on your farm and take a look at what's happening below the ground. If you're a non-farmer, if you get a chance to go somewhere that has a root pit, take a look. It's really interesting to see what's happening below ground. Or maybe you've got a garden and you say, well, heck, I could do that on the end of my garden and just see what my root systems look like. It would be a great learning experience to find out what the other half of the plant is doing.
Well, the other good learning experience that's always available to you is scouting your fields. And when you're out there, look for our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
With new seed traits and chemistries entering the market, your crop protection equipment needs precision and adaptability. Hi-Pro Innovative Spray Technologies has the products to give your applications greater accuracy, less drift, and more coverage. Hi-Pro, right on technology, right on target.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
I love the fact that we get very little grain loss from the head. Other brands, other corn heads, we've seen that up to 3-4 bushel per acre in some instances where we have some dry corn. We're growing as much corn as we can. We don't want to be leaving this out in the field at harvest time. So the fellow's done a nice job of making sure we're capturing almost every kernel that we can. So yes, I would recommend the fellow head to other farmers.
Apply Gypsoil on your farm to add cost-effective sulfur to soils and improve soil structure. Gypsoil increases calcium and helps flush excess magnesium in tight soils, improve air and water infiltration, and reduce problem wet spots and crusting. Better soil quality means better water quality, so Gypsoil is good for the environment too. For more information about putting Gypsoil to work on your farm, call 866-GYPSOIL or 497-7645. Visit online at gypsoil.com.
As weed resistance becomes more of a problem across the country, your crop protection program needs to stay flexible to be effective. Hi-Pro Innovative Spray Technologies' wide selection of spray tips and nozzle configurations are available to keep your crop protection program right on technology, right on target.
Soybean lodging. It's one of the things that, you think about corn lodging, wheat lodging. We don't talk maybe as much about soybean lodging as we should, but you got to take a look at the stems, check your soybean plants out, and what's wrong with the stem. Is it too thin? Is there disease? What's going on? So what do you think most of the time, Darren?
Well, I'll say this. With soybeans in general across our country, where we're really falling down is with fertility. We just are not fertilizing that soybean crop enough, and it's so obvious when you look at guys that are getting 80, 90, 100 bushel beans. And you ask them, what are you doing? How are you getting 100 bushel beans? Well, they say, we're just fertilizing. That's all we're doing. We're trying to feed the crop for this big yield. And that's the huge difference. Now, are there disease issues? Absolutely. There's more disease issues each year, it seems like. And yes, that definitely comes into play.
Yeah, but hey, let's talk about why we have some of those disease issues. I think it still comes back to fertility, exactly like you're talking about. If you're shorting your plants, and let's be honest, when you look around the country, the average soybean farmer is hardly fertilizing his soybeans, yet expecting a great crop. Okay, you're not feeding the plant, and yes, it's absolutely going to be more likely to get disease then.
All right, so let's just start right from the beginning. Seed treatment usage. This is one let's just face it, in 2016, a lot of guys were cutting. Guys are looking at, man, I just can't afford to spend that much money. Maybe I'll cut the insecticide off my seed treatment. Or maybe I'll just cut that seed treatment out completely because, hey, I'm planting later, soils are dry, it's warm, maybe I'll be okay. We saw more disease issues this year than we have in a number of years, whether it was Pythium, Phytophthora issues. We're seeing some sudden death now that started off as a Fusarium infection early in the season. I mean, there's a lot of things going into play here with that soybean early, getting developed, getting that root system established. And a lot of those come up the stalk, and they're going to start showing themselves once we get into a stressful time. So we get into some of the heat in the summer, we get into some of the dry periods in the summer, or especially when we're flowering. And right now, soybeans across the country, we're seeing flowers, pods, all those things. It's very stressful to the plant. That's where we see a lot of these issues show up that really happened at planting time or shortly after.
Another thing that a lot of people look at is, you know, my plants are just growing so tall anymore that it's too tall. It's simply too tall for a normal stalk to support. So I need to do something to just shorten the plants. So maybe I'll spray Cobra. Okay, you can do that. You can shorten the plants a little bit with Cobra, with Harass. That'd be like the old Pinnacle, if you remember that from 25 years ago. Or some people talk about Harmony out of wheat. That particular chemistry. There are a lot of herbicides you can use to shorten the plant a little bit, but is that actually going to help you a lot when it comes to yield? Well, that's pretty debatable. So you can try those things on your farm, but otherwise, I still come back to fertility.
Okay, so when we look at the fertility thing, let's just hit the big one right off the bat, potassium. All right, we're not putting enough potassium out there. We just aren't. In our cornfields, we're barely putting enough potassium out there. And then what's left for the soybeans? For many farmers, and you may fall into this category too, well, I'm putting out enough of that P and K on my corn crop, and it's going to be good enough to carry me through my soybean crop. Let's face it, it's not. At the Ag PhD Field Day again this year, we got comments from farmers across the country. Wow, what type of soybeans are you planting? The stalks are so thick and so strong. Well, we aren't planting a different type of soybeans. We're using potassium fertilizer the way it needs to be used.
But the big question is, how much do you actually need? And that's where we would encourage you, take a look at the charts. They're available out there. Otherwise, you can download the free Ag PhD Fertilizer Removal app, where we've got International Plant Nutrition Institute numbers that are going to tell you, based on your corn yield, your soybean yield, your wheat yield, just about any crop you can think of, plug that crop in, plug in your yield goal, and it'll tell you what you need for potassium. But the other thing is, we just want to get potassium levels overall in the soil to start with at 4% base saturation K. If you're not at least 4%, the odds are extremely high that you're going to show potassium deficiency in that plant at some point during the year. Because don't forget, with soybeans, at the peak point, you're going to need way more than you do at the peak point for corn.
That's uptake per day, and that's really the big thing. You're going to need almost twice as much in pounds per acre coming out of the ground and into the plants with soybeans per day that you will in corn. And people think, well, how can that possibly be? I got this 10-foot tall corn plant. That's certainly going to need more potassium. Yes, it is, total pounds. But look at your soybean crop. It's not really taking up a huge amount of nutrients until we get to the reproductive stages. So in a 1 month time period, it's got to take up a tremendous amount of nutrients. And we see this a lot in ground that is short in potassium. We can raise a decent corn crop because it's pulling a little bit of potassium up all through the season. But soybeans, it's got to pull it all out at one time. So if we're short, soybeans are really going to suffer. The other thing that we're seeing in terms of fertility with soybeans is guys that have taken plant tissue tests this year. We're getting calls, and we have all through the season about, well, hey, my plant tissue test says I'm fine on everything on my soybeans. We say, hold on, just wait till we get to the reproductive stages, then really start doing intensive plant tissue testing to see what's going on. And now what we're hearing from those same guys is, okay, hey, I was fine on my micros, but now I'm short in things like manganese and copper, and those are absolutely critical for having a good stalk.
Well, once again, when it comes to lodging with soybeans, there are a lot of things you can look at, but really the base thing and the most important thing is fertility. Get your base saturation K above 4%. Take a look at your micronutrients like manganese and copper. Just get a well-balanced diet for your soybeans, and you'll find your soybeans are going to respond with a better stem and overall better yield.
And don't let weeds take away any of this needed nutrition from your soybean crop. We'll show you how to stop one key weed coming up later in the show.
Are you storing grain in your bin from last harvest? You will want to avoid running your bin fans when the air is warm and wet to avoid sprouting and spoilage. The AgriDry Bullseye Controller has the capability to automatically run your fans when the weather conditions are safe for quality grain control. Stop monitoring the weather or babysitting your bins and let the Bullseye Controller keep your grain safe. Visit agridryllc.com to find your local dealer today.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
I trust Agro Liquid because I've seen the results and they're positive and they work on my farm, they work in my environment. When I started farming, we was farming around 125 acres and now we're up to around 1,700 acres. I think I was recognized as the Tennessee Young Farmer by being a leader in the community and also being innovative. I'm always looking for new products, but I got to make sure that those products are sustainable. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and I would love for them to farm this land.
I would recommend Morton for many reasons, but one is that they have a long history of standing behind their buildings.
Our sales experience with Morton was a nice experience. You know, they told us what it was going to cost, what it was going to be, you know, how it was going to run, and it worked out really well for us.
Morton has built me one heck of a nice building, and it should stand for a very, very long time. I was very happy with the workmanship.
Check us out online at mortonbuildings.com.
Getting alfalfa established is tremendously important because that seed costs so much money and you're going to leave the stand in for multiple years. So we want to talk today about doing the right things for fertility, for weed control, and seed to soil contact.
Okay, right away, let's just start with seed going in the ground. Are you going to mix something in there? You're going to throw some oats with it or something else to help protect that alfalfa as it comes up? Well, it depends on where you're at and what your goals are for the system. If your goal is I want to raise very fine stemmed, high quality alfalfa, chances are you're not putting anything with it. You're just going straight alfalfa and that's it. Maybe you're in very light soils and you say, I'm extremely worried about sand blowing around and cutting off my alfalfa. I have to put something with it. I understand. There's those choices you've got to make right from the beginning.
Yeah, but keep in mind, you're planting a weed. So it's way easier to raise one crop as opposed to two. So when you're planting a weed, what do we always talk about with weed control? We want it killed off as early as possible. So if you're putting a nurse crop with it, then I'd suggest killing it off as early as possible.
All right, so you let it get up big enough that it can provide that protection and then get rid of that crop. All right, so let's just look at the alfalfa itself. The big thing that we want to get is a very thick stand to start off with. You only get one shot at doing this, and yeah, hopefully you're going to make that stand last 3 years or 4 years, depending on what you're doing in your rotation, maybe longer in your area. But to do that, we've got to have awesome weed control, and it starts with a pre-emerge herbicide. This is where I lose a lot of people across the country, and they're like, what? I don't want to put any pre down. I don't want to take any chance something dings my alfalfa because the seed's really expensive. And also, I really don't know what options are out there, but there are some really good options.
And a lot of people just don't want to spend the money, but we would strongly encourage you, put down some Eptam. Half a gallon per acre is pretty much the rate in most areas. You can check with an agronomist by you, but that's the rate we recommend. But it's got to be instantly incorporated. You can't spray it on and work it in an hour later. You've got to put it right on with the digger. We would also encourage you, do double incorporation. All Eptam is, if you can remember in the old days with corn, there was a product called Eradicane. It's just Eradicane without the corn safener. It's a tremendous product when you only use it once every 5 or 10 years on your farm. It will be lights out.
Then let's move to the fertility, because just like with the weed control, you've got one shot in 3 or 4 years to really do things right. So with P&K, they don't move down well in the soil. So here is your chance to get P&K levels up. And then you can just try to maintain them as you go through the crop, because alfalfa is a heavy remover of P&K from the soil.
Yeah, but honestly, if you say, look, I'm going to take X number of pounds out over the next 4 years, I'd try to put as many of those pounds out as possible up front. I know it's a lot of initial investment, but you'll be able to get by with less fertility that way, and the fertility will be placed right. Get that P&K down 4, 6, 8 inches deep, something like that, where the alfalfa can use it.
The other thing that we haven't discussed yet is just seed to soil contact. When you're putting the seed out there, it's kind of like seeding your lawn. You can't just throw seed out there and have the lawn be all fluffy and expect things to work out right. You've got to put the seed out and get it rolled and packed in there correctly. That way that seed is going to germinate properly and evenly, and you're going to get the whole stand coming up at the same time.
Well, once again, we suggest that you fertilize heavily in the beginning, get some P&K deep, do a good job with weed control by using Eptam, and then make sure you have great seed to soil contact. Those are the keys if you want to have a great long-term alfalfa stand.
Well, speaking of weed control, we'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up next.
Our weed of the week is not a specific weed, it's just a general term, volunteer trees.
Well, we're in the right spot to be talking about that. We're very close to a well-established tree belt, and what happens when you get established trees is they produce seeds and they produce root systems that go out, and you just see all these volunteer trees starting to pop up, and they pop up out in your field. Trees are really heavy removers of water and nutrients, so we've got to get them under control or you're going to lose substantial yield.
All right, what are you going to use to kill trees? Well, a lot of people like Tordon, and that's great in ditches, pastures, fence lines, non-crop areas. Tordon will kill trees, but how are you going to kill them out in the field?
Well, tillage is one option, certainly, and if you're right along the edge of a tree belt, doing some tillage is kind of nice to prune back some of the roots, and also as new little seedlings get started, you can easily till them out of the ground as long as you don't let them grow for several years.
How good is Roundup?
Well, Roundup can be okay. The challenge is just getting good coverage. And a lot of times as these trees get started, you may only see a leaf or two. And if they pop up, sometime later during the season when you've got some crop canopy out there, it gets tougher to get good coverage on them.
Otherwise, some of the plant growth products like dicamba, 2,4-D, those types of products are pretty decent on killing trees. Even HPPDs have some activity.
You just have to be careful not to let those trees get established, because once they get thick and woody, many of the herbicides that you may use will just burn the leaves off.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, volunteer trees. But stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
Take a look inside any rotary combine and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
We've been dealing with AgriLiquid a little over 7 years. I was skeptical, to be honest, but I watched the results from several clients. Those results were increased production and reduction in input cost. With AgriLiquid, we saw an increase in the size of the initial root mass. For ranchers, that means forage production a lot quicker. AgriLiquid works. The bottom line is profitability.
Compaction created during planting leaves thousands of dollars of potential yield in your fields. Copperhead Ag has developed the Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheel to close the seed trench more effectively. With a unique combination of closing power and control, the Furrow Cruiser provides earlier, more even emergence and higher stand counts, returning yield potential and putting profit back in your pocket. For more information on why you should never run a traditional closing system again, visit copperheadag.com.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
I love the fact that we get very little grain loss from the head. Other brands, other corn heads, we've seen that up to 3-4 bushel per acre in some instances where we have some dry corn. We're growing as much corn as we can. We don't want to be leaving this out in the field at harvest time. So the fellow's done a nice job of making sure we're capturing almost every kernel that we can. So yes, I would recommend the fellow head to other farmers.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Don't think a combine fire can happen to you? Learn how to prevent a fire in today's Iron Talk. Combine fires happen every year, and this summer during wheat harvest has been no exception. Now, I realize manufacturers have added many safety features and design upgrades to newer combine models, but anytime you have diesel fuel, oil, dry stalks, chaff, and a heat source, you got some risk. Nearly every farmer out there can think of a friend, relative, or neighbor who's either had a close call with a combine fire or had a total machine loss. So today, here are a few tips on preventing a combine fire on your farm. Talk to your local implement dealer, and they'll tell you from experience. Nearly every combine fire they've seen could have been prevented by taking a few minutes a day to clean your machine. Your biggest risk area is around the engine. Most fires are starting there, and for good reason. That's where most of the heat is generated and where the chaff and debris tend to settle. Part of the reason that chaff builds up around engines is due to the presence of grease, oil, and fuels that have either leaked out or been spilled. It's wet, it's sticky, and together with dry chaff and crop residues is almost the perfect recipe for a fire. Preventing problems begins with a thorough cleaning. A hot water pressure wash will remove grease and oil buildup. On our farm, we add a product called Fleet Degreaser in our pressure washer to speed up the process. Now, if there are no new leaks or spills of oil, grease, or fuel, a daily blowdown with your air compressor could be sufficient to decrease your risks of combine fires. Especially during corn harvest, finding time to do some daily cleaning is pretty tough. Just 15 minutes a day, though, is well worth your time. Plus, climbing around on your machine on a daily basis is a good idea just to look for any potential problems or upcoming maintenance items. So don't be a statistic on your farm this year. Start with a hot pressure wash around the engine and anywhere else that grease, oil, or fuel buildup may be on your equipment. Then use compressed air on a daily basis to clear away chaff and other crop debris. Taking just a few extra minutes a day could keep you and your family safe from a combine fire. That's it for today's Iron Talk, and now, back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, I want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show, where we take your live phone calls each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on SiriusXM Channel 147.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
There are as many living things in a handful of soil as there are people on planet Earth. But what do they do, and how do farmers work with them to raise successful crops? Beneficial bacteria, fungi, and other microbial creatures are being used in the production of nearly every crop. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.